You picked up your phone today before you were fully awake. Before you said a word to another person. Before you even knew what you were looking for. Your hand just moved. And here is the part that should stop you for a moment. You probably did not find anything important. A few notifications. Maybe nothing at all. And yet you will do it again in 20 minutes. This is not a bad habit. This is not a lack of discipline. This is one of the most sophisticated traps ever built, and it was engineered specifically for the way your brain is wired at the deepest level. Once you understand the mechanism, you will see it everywhere. In your phone. In your relationships. In every slot machine ever built. In the food you crave. In the social media feed that somehow keeps scrolling even when you meant to stop 3 minutes ago. It all traces back to one system. And that system does not run on pleasure. It runs on almost. In the 1950s, a neuroscientist named James Olds made one of the most unsettling discoveries in the history of brain science. He implanted electrodes into the brains of rats and gave them the ability to press a lever that directly stimulated a region deep in the brain. The rats pressed the lever. And pressed it again. And kept pressing it. They pressed it instead of eating. They pressed it instead of sleeping. Some pressed it hundreds of times per hour until they collapsed from exhaustion. Scientists assumed they had found the brain's pleasure center. The region that made animals feel good. They were wrong. Decades later, a neuroscientist named Kent Berridge at the University of Michigan ran an experiment that would completely rewrite how scientists understood that region of the brain. He separated wanting from liking. Not as concepts. As measurable biological states. He found that the dopamine system, the system that had been activated in Olds's rats, was not the system that produced pleasure. It was the system that produced wanting. Craving. The compulsion to seek. Dopamine does not make you feel good when you get something. It makes you desperately, urgently need to go get it. The rats were not pressing the lever because it felt good. They were pressing it because stopping felt unbearable. This is the system your phone hijacks every single day. Every time you pick up your phone, you are essentially pressing a lever. You do not know what is on the other side. Maybe something exciting. Maybe nothing. But the not knowing is not a flaw in the experience. It is the entire mechanism. Because your dopamine system does not respond to reward. It responds to the possibility of reward. And the possibility of reward is most powerful when the outcome is unpredictable. This is called a variable reward schedule. And it is the most addictive behavioral pattern ever documented in neuroscience. B.F. Skinner, the behavioral psychologist who spent decades studying how reward shapes behavior, ran a simple set of experiments in the mid-20th century that revealed something deeply uncomfortable about human and animal psychology. He gave animals levers. Some levers produced food every single time. Some never produced food. And some produced food randomly, unpredictably, sometimes yes and sometimes no. The animals that became most fixated, most compulsive, most impossible to redirect, were not the ones with the guaranteed reward. They were the ones with the unpredictable reward. The variable schedule created a pattern of behavior that was almost impossible to extinguish. Even when the food stopped coming entirely, the animals kept pressing. And pressing. And pressing. Your phone is a variable reward machine. Every time you open an app, you might find something that makes you laugh. Or something that enrages you. Or something that makes you feel seen, or envious, or connected, or excluded. Or nothing. The randomness is not an accident. The designers who built these systems understood, from the beginning, that a consistent experience trains a mild habit. But an inconsistent experience, one that sometimes delivers and sometimes does not, trains an obsession. The slot machine is the purest expression of this principle. No one plays a slot machine because it reliably delivers money. Everyone who has ever played a slot machine knows it mostly does not. They play because sometimes it does. The gap between the pull and the outcome. The spinning symbols. The almost. The near miss that feels, for a half second, like a win. That is not a coincidence of casino design. That is the deliberate engineering of a dopamine spike. And your phone recreates that experience dozens of times per day. The pull-to-refresh gesture on almost every major social app was designed explicitly to mimic the slot machine pull. Sean Parker, one of the founders of Facebook, said this openly in an interview in 2017. He described the design philosophy as giving users a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post. He said it exploited a vulnerability in human psychology. He described building a social validation feedback loop. He used the phrase, "the inventors knew, and they did it anyway." But here is what makes this harder to resist than almost any other compulsion. Your brain does not just want the reward. It wants to be the one who finds it. The seeking itself feels meaningful. There is a reason the dopamine spike peaks not when you receive a reward, but just before. The moment of anticipation, the half second between picking up the phone and seeing what is there, that is when the neurological response is strongest. The arrival of the actual content, good or bad, starts the decline. You do not keep scrolling because you found something satisfying. You keep scrolling because the next thing might be, and the anticipation of that possibility is neurologically more compelling than any individual post. This is why closing the app does not work. Because closing the app feels like stopping mid-sentence. Like leaving just before the reward might arrive. The system is designed to make every exit feel premature. Robert Sapolsky, a neuroendocrinologist at Stanford who has spent decades studying stress, dopamine, and reward, describes this effect in precise terms. He documented how dopamine neurons fire most aggressively not at guaranteed rewards, but at 50% probability outcomes. The uncertain outcome does not dampen the response. It maximizes it. Your brain, evolved for an environment where unpredictable rewards meant finding food or water or safety in an uncertain world, is now applying that same high alert-seeking behavior to a glass rectangle in your pocket. And unlike food or water, the phone never runs out of almost. There is always one more notification to check. One more story to see. One more comment that might change how you feel. One more piece of information that might be the thing you were not quite looking for but would know if you found it. The feed is infinite. The almost is infinite. And an infinite variable reward machine, deployed against a brain that evolved to never stop seeking in uncertain environments, produces exactly what you experience every day. The inability to fully stop. But here is something important to understand about all of this. The fact that your brain responds this way is not evidence of weakness. It is evidence of a system working exactly as designed, both in the evolutionary sense and in the product design sense. Your seeking system kept your ancestors alive. It drove them to explore, to search, to not give up when the environment was harsh and rewards were scarce. It is one of the most powerful survival mechanisms the human brain has. The problem is not the system. The problem is the environment. An environment designed by people who understood the system better than you did, and who built something specifically calibrated to keep it activated indefinitely. That is not an accident. That is a business model. So tomorrow morning, when your hand moves toward your phone before your eyes are fully open, you will know what is actually happening. Your dopamine system is waking up before you are. It is scanning for almost. It is pressing the lever before you made a conscious decision to press anything at all. That is not weakness. That is not failure. That is 100,000 years of seeking behavior, pointed at a screen. The lever is still there. The almost is still there. And your hand is already moving.